Hi, thanks for being in a new video. This time I have the POCO F6 and we are going to do a full review. Let's get started. This device is part of the F6 series. Remember that there is also a POCO F6 Pro model. In case you also want to know about it, I already have its full review available. But this is a slightly more basic edition, although the performance is going to be practically the same, and that is why it becomes much more attractive because it is cheaper than the Pro edition, even though they have a very similar performance. At the time of its launch, its announced price in Mexico is 7,299 pesos, although remember the prices here are not the same as there. In Mexico, taxes are included, and even so, I think it is a considerably attractive price taking into account that we are talking about a device that has the starter, and that is also a considerably prickly storage, and also that it has the Snapdragon 8 Gen 3, which is quite powerful. Obviously, being a little device, its distribution will be exclusively online, and that is one of the points that makes the price can be much tighter. Although, as a negative point, to say the least, if you are not used to buying online, that could represent a difficulty for you, but I definitely think it's worth it. Join me in getting to know it. Let's quickly go through all the aspects to get to the performance fast. The design will be very positive as it has very reduced bezels, giving it a very modern look, and it also comes protected with Gorilla Glass Victus on the front. On the right side will be placed the power button with volume buttons, and on the top, microphone, infrared, and speaker. In the left profile view, we note that there is no button or other element and has a thickness of 7.8 millimeters, which is remarkable because little is not so focused on the design and still is a stylish device. And at the bottom will be placed the tray where we can have SIM cards. There is also a microphone, the USB port, and finally the main speaker. The back cover is made of plastic, although in this case it has a slightly more reflective design, but it still looks simple in this case. Unlike others, little doesn't seem to have a huge window in the camera module area, which gives it a bit of a different feel from the rest of the devices in its family. It has a weight of 179 grams and is available in addition to this black color option in green color and titanium color. The screen will be another attractive element. It has a size of 6.67 inches, traditional in Xiaomi devices, but the resolution is 1.5K. Specifically, we are talking about 1220 by 2712 pixels, reaching a density of 446 pixels per inch. So the results you see through this device will be extremely sharp, both in multimedia content and text, especially in text with small fonts you could get to notice much more. This is a Flow AMOLED panel. Xiaomi calls it so because it achieves very small bezels with this type of technology. In addition, it has very intense colors, high contrast, everything we could ask for. And with respect to the maximum brightness level, it reaches 2400 nits when you are watching HDR content. That is, the brightest areas in a small way will have the ability to emit that level of brightness, as it is compatible with Dolby Vision and HDR+, achieving a very good quality. Obviously, it will be a comfortable screen. It offers the dark mode that many manufacturers offer. It also curiously offers a sunlight mode that will further raise the brightness of the screen, and it has a new feature called Advanced Textures that adds blur effects in the user interface, although obviously it could reduce performance or raise battery consumption. It also offers different color calibration modes, of which the most recommended is to use Original Color Pro, or manually you can set the color temperature of the screen. Obviously, we are in front of a 120 Hz display in its refresh rate, so it is able to show quite smooth and fluid movements as long as the system is well optimized, since as you noticed in this case, it showed a loading process before showing an animation. So, overall, I think it is a device that is going to give us a good quality on the screen. It also includes an artificial intelligence image engine to improve and optimize the results you see through it, but they are disabled by default. For sound, you already anticipated that it has a speaker at the bottom and curiously at the top has two audio outputs. One will be through the headset for calls, where it will be able to play multimedia content, and another on the frame. So it does have stereo sound. In fact, we could say it's a very good quality audio with a very good volume. The speaker on the bottom has a little bit more power in the bass, but honestly it feels like very good quality sound as if it were a much more expensive device. So let's listen to a little test, though remember it's not the same listening to it live.
like helium.
The software experience is also very complete, offering us Dolby Atmos and a 10-band graphic equalizer, also with presets available. In fact, it also offers an option called surround sound, so it offers a very good quality. It does not have a headphone jack though, and that is possibly one of the main complaints of users. However, it does offer us high-quality codecs for using wireless headphones, such as aptX Adaptive. It also has LHDC support, and it also has LDSE support. So if you buy good quality wireless headphones, you will have good resolution audio anyway. Although I think for gaming the most important thing will be latency, and in this case definitely to have headphones with low latency or virtually no latency, you're going to need to use the USB-C port. The device integrates two microphones, one on the bottom and one on the top. Let's listen to a test recorded with this device.
Esta grabación ha sido realizada con los micrófonos integrados del POCO F6.
It seems to me that it picks up voices with good quality, but below you will hear a test of a video recorded with this device, configuring the system in my living room at maximum volume. As you may notice, it has a bit more trouble keeping the sound clear in very noisy conditions, so it won't be an expert in this area. The front camera is 20 megapixels, an unusual resolution for Xiaomi. It has f2.2 aperture and fixed focus. If you want to open the camera quickly, you can double press the power button or also press the volume down button. Although those options are disabled by default, capture is considerably snappy, although it's not going to be your priority. In fact, it doesn't integrate burst on the front camera either, but it does integrate many beauty options with lots and lots of parameters, and it also comes with different color filters. You can also activate the capture mode using the palm of your hand, but it is disabled. You must go to the menu to activate this option and finally have a little more comfortable capture. The front camera on this device, interestingly, is different from the vast majority of front cameras that Xiaomi uses on all its devices. So at 20 megapixels, I think the level of detail is just right. Even in this backlit scenario, it also comes out well balanced in the highlights and shadows, so there's not too much to comment on that. I think the selfies are going to be fine. Obviously, you have to consider that the preview doesn't look very optimized, so even though before taking the picture it looks like the result will be bad, actually after processing it does a good job. However, I don't consider that the photograph really has a 20 megapixel level of detail. It looks a bit simpler, but overall I think it is a good quality camera. In fact, I liked how it performs at night, giving a very clean picture and also retaining a good level of detail. In that sense, I think the camera has surprised for the better. Even backlit nighttime results give good performance. This is curious because little usually do not usually focus much on the cameras, but this is one of those models that does leave you with a good feeling, at least for the moment, on the front camera. It even notes that night portraits are also going to have a good quality, although in this case I think the noise is a little more present in the foreground, especially in grainy. In the background, due to the blur, it doesn't seem to have noise, and that causes the photo to look a bit fake, but overall if you don't get too close to see the details, it looks like a good quality photo. In fact, on the day we found that the most curious thing about this camera is that it does manage to keep the objects in the foreground in focus and does so with very good quality, surprising a lot in the result. So curiously, although it is not one of its highlights or most attractive points, yes, I could tell you that it is a very strong point in this device. And on the back we'll find the 16mm ultra-wide camera with an 8 megapixel sensor and 2.2 f aperture plus fixed focus, and then the 26mm camera with a 50 megapixel sensor and 1.59 f aperture plus optical stabilization and autofocus. And in this case, like most devices these days, there is a bit of latency in the viewfinder, but apparently you can get a very close capture of the moment you want. In this case, I tried to capture number 3 in 2 attempts, and in both I was very close, so I think it responds fast. And it has a burst that you can activate by sliding the shutter to the right. The burst is up to 50 pictures and it doesn't take too long to start, although it's not a burst you can leave for very long, but it does help you extract the exact right moment. By tapping on screen, we can adjust exposure or focus, and obviously Pro mode is also available, where you can have more parameters like white balance, focus, shutter speed that can go up to 30 seconds, ISO that can go up to 6400, or compensation, but note that it doesn't have more advanced RAW photography, although you can take 50 megapixel pictures in Pro mode. Scanning QR codes can be done from the main camera interface, although it does add a button that can be a bit tricky to press before you can do the action. And to scan documents, it is necessary to enter a special mode, but it is a considerably good scanner, since in addition to automatically crop the photo, it will allow us to do a little editing to optimize the detail and look like a much more advanced and sophisticated scanner. Although for now it does not allow us to add images to make it a more extensive PDF. In high-resolution mode, you can get 50 megapixel photos and the sensor is perfectly well used. This high level of detail is definitely noticeable, unlike other devices that could integrate high-resolution cameras. But even in high-resolution mode, it is not possible to take advantage of this sensor. In this case, the result is very positive. In motion scenes, I think both cameras do a good job. As you notice, the ultra-wide camera has no drawbacks in this regard. And the main camera, much less so. In fact, it is curious that from now on you realize the difference between the main camera and the ultra-wide camera. It's very obvious that the ultra-wide camera gets to overexpose the whole result quite a bit, while the main camera gives a much more accurate tonality. But speaking specifically about motion, I think the result is very good in both cases. In fact, even when zooming in 2x inside the sensor, the result is still good, although again a slightly overexposed result can be appreciated. But let's look at outdoor results, in this case with the ultra-wide camera, so you can tell that it has a bit of chromatic aberration and slight distortions at the edges, but nothing really serious. In fact, I've seen more expensive devices having much simpler ultra-wide cameras. So in this case, the result seems to me to be positive. In fact, we also have a good color. Only as you noticed a moment ago, there might be scenarios where it overexposes the result a little bit. But in this other example, you see that there is not so much difference between the ultra-wide and the main. In fact, the prime also has a very good quality. In this case, the lens is much more advanced, it does not generate so much chromatic aberration, at least not very visible or noticeable, and maintains good color rendering. Note that this device allows us to take pictures of the rings, that is, zoom 2x approximately while maintaining optical quality, and if you notice a good photograph. Obviously, if you start to zoom in much closer, you might be able to distinguish that in this case it is already using digital zoom, but without zooming in, it seems to me that the result is remarkable. Even with a zoom of about 5x, it still maintains a very well optimized result. It is clear that it is using digital zoom, but believe me, there are other devices that don't get to take advantage of their high-resolution sensors. But in this case, it looks well-optimized camera. The maximum zoom is 10x, where there will obviously be areas that are no longer able to be distinguished, but it is a good quality 10x digital zoom. In backlit scenarios, surprisingly, it does manage to balance lights and shadows well if it is not an exaggeratedly complicated backlight, and the result is positive. In this case, you're looking at the ultra-wide camera, which again reveals a little bit more chromatic aberration, especially in this kind of backlit scenario, but overall it looks like a good picture. And with the main camera, we have a much more accurate balance of highlights and shadows. It doesn't overexpose the picture as much, and I personally like the result a lot, especially also with the successful handling of the color. And at night, it will also give us good results. Note that in this case, if you use the night mode, will increase a little more the sharpness of the photo without getting too high the level of detail, but if you do not get too close, you can see a difference of a much more defined photograph. With the main camera, there is also a slightly more noticeable difference when using the night mode, since the most illuminated areas will not be overexposed too much, and the result, as I say, will be of higher quality. Even using the zoom setting at night, the result still looks good quality, and in the darker areas, I think the camera does a good job, although it does overexpose the darker areas a bit too much. Although in this case, I must say that it was a cloudy day and it is normal that the sky does not look completely dark, but I think it was slightly more illuminated than I would like in this result. With the night mode, I think this result improved. The scene looks a little darker where it should look darker, and you see better defined results in the brighter areas. Even with the zoom setting, the result is going to be very similar. So it's a camera that overall I think performs very well, even in difficult scenarios. And in terms of macro photography, the result also pleased me. In this case, this is as close as you can get to the subjects, but I think it's close enough to get a good result. In fact, if you zoom in to 52mm, the result can look even nicer. I don't think you need anything else, so you definitely don't miss the macro camera that might be present in other devices. And if you find the ultra-wide camera not very nice for this kind of wide scenes, remember that you can use the panorama mode, although you don't have so much vertical width, but the horizontal width is good, and in this case it keeps this same essence of accurate colors that we see with the main camera. Also, this panorama is high resolution, although there may be some areas that appear a little blurry, so you need to take the shot slowly to get a good capture. Finally, for portrait photography, we also have a good result. It just would have been better if it would allow us to also use the 52mm setting on this camera with portrait mode, but that is not available. However, the result is very good in terms of foreground detection. The blur is nice in the background, although slightly overexposed in the brighter areas, but that's getting too fussy. The result, I think it delivers very well. For video recording, we will find 4K with 60 frames per second as the maximum resolution, obviously this with the main camera, while the ultra-wide camera and the front camera will be able to record in full HD at 60 frames per second as maximum resolution. When recording video, we have a convenient slider for zooming, although there are no quick shortcuts to change any specific setting. We can also pause and resume recording and take pictures, but we can't rotate or turn on the flashlight without stopping recording. Interestingly, the beauty effect is also available, but with a single slider and also some color filters, but the video will drop its resolution to HD. In this case, we decided to record in 4K at 60 frames per second, and look at the result, it is quite nice. In fact, recording outdoors, you also appreciate a good color rendering, very similar to what we saw in photography. It doesn't seem to have any problems with exposure or focus, so I liked the video as well. Although when zooming in you might have a bit more problems with the focus, and obviously it's not gonna be as optimized a zoom as in the photo, but either way I think it's still good quality. The ultra-wide camera can only record in full HD, so it's not as recommended for recording video, plus the colors won't be as accurate as what we saw on the main camera. And as I told you, the focus is handled quite accurately. In this case, using the main camera, there is no problem with aggressive movements or with slightly more subtle movements. I think that the device does manage to handle the focus quickly and accurately. Although at night it's going to show whether it's really an attractive camera or not, and in this case I think it reduces noise well enough. In fact, the main camera doesn't look like it struggles too much with focusing and these kinds of issues either, so the result in nighttime video recording I also liked on this device. Obviously, if you go to the much darker and more difficult areas, you might get to notice a lot more noise, especially if there is a bit more movement, which is normal for devices of these characteristics. It's not your main focus and still delivers well. Although the ultra-wide camera definitely gets to suffer much more, there is more presence of noise and much less detail, so it will not be recommended to record with this camera. But I don't think any other device in this price range will have a very outstanding ultra-wide camera recording at night. And in backlit scenarios, you will also notice that the ultra-wide camera can really suffer. There are very aggressive jumps in exposure even without turning the face too much. Therefore, it will not be advisable to shoot in this kind of lighting conditions, while the main camera will have a better recording quality in this kind of scenarios. Although the focus might have a bit of difficulty in these backlit scenarios, but it's not really a big deal, especially considering that this device is not going so focused in this aspect. And even so, the quality seems to me to get to be good, balancing highlights and shadows. And as for stabilization, it seems to me that the ultra-wide camera is a good result if you're walking. In this case, it combines optical stabilization and digital stabilization. Therefore, the result is very good with simple movements. Although if you go running like desperate, definitely the movement is going to be much more noticeable. It is not an expert in this regard, but still, it incorporates a mode called constant video, which we could also call super stable. Although the resolution drops down to full HD, but it could definitely be a bit more useful in this kind of videos where there are very fast movements. However, it could generate a slightly unpleasant blur effect, but the result is fine. This device does not integrate any portrait video recording mode, but it does integrate a fast camera mode, even in this case in 4K. And again, it's something we could highlight because other similar devices have a much simpler fast camera mode. In this case, you even see good stabilization. The speed can be from 4x all the way up to 1800x. So, you can record well movements of people, or you can record very well also landscapes quite spectacularly because you could even record the growth of plants. And on the other hand, the slow motion mode is also positive because it can be in full HD at 120 frames per second, or it can even be in full HD up to 240 frames per second, so you would have an even slower scene. And definitely here it can really stand out over several competitors that may not have such a slow motion. The front camera will not have 4K recording capabilities, so it is much simpler in this regard, but fortunately it does have a good level of stabilization. Although this does produce a crop that will mean you'll have to stretch your arm as far as possible if you want to come out frame properly, but the fact that it has stabilization is definitely appreciated because it will make your videos look much better if you're walking or something similar. Even when running, I find that it stabilizes well, although recording against the backlight will not have the same performance as if it had the rear camera, so the illuminated areas will come out quite overexposed and it is not recommended to record in these scenarios. In fact, at night you will also notice much more noise, so it is a simple camera that requires good lighting. Otherwise, the result could come out less defined and with a higher amount of noise, but that's for the most demanding. I think for a good number of people it will be high enough video quality, although it should be noted that it slows down to 27 frames per second in these low light scenarios. And in this case, it doesn't seem to have an option to brighten its display more brightly to try and give your face more light. But note that it also has a stabilized fast camera mode, which is also remarkable for a device with these features. Although it does not integrate front slow motion or even a portrait mode, but it does integrate a dual recording mode that is quite curious because you can have it in split screen, or you can also select one of the buttons that appear on your screen to transform, and now it is a picture-in-picture mode where you have a small box that you can move along the entire screen but you cannot resize. And in this case it does keep the focus, and the zoom has to be with 2 fingers because it doesn't show some easy slider, but it's also enabled. So it's a dual recording mode, which is considerably good. This device comes with Xiaomi's HyperOS on Android 14. It has guaranteed 3 years of software updates and 4 years of security patches. Among some outstanding features, we could mention the always-on screen where you can select some clock or some specific phrase that you want to always be showing even if you have your device locked. And in fact, with this new version of the system, remember that you could also get to customize in a much more attractive way your lock screen, as it would even be able to detect a certain level of depth in your wallpaper, and in a very simple way you can switch between different covers and different styles with lots of customization. So that's a very prominent section. It also has some quick cell phone activation gestures that are traditional on many devices, but we could highlight turning on the flashlight by double tapping the power button, although obviously that would disable the gesture of accessing the camera. But also as a novelty, you can give 2 taps on the back to open a specific application or 3 taps for another application, so you gain several shortcuts. Obviously, it also has a small sidebar that will allow you to open applications in a floating format. You can open up to 2 applications at the same time in this format, although YouTube does not appear among the supported applications, but note that you can also minimize them quite easily by simply dragging to the edge. And in this case, we could also resize the application or definitely close it by sliding it up. It also has a feature to take advantage of the fingerprint reader as a heart rate reader, and note that it also has some gestures to be able to control your device without the need to touch the screen. Then there are some apps that are compatible. Among them, obviously the highlight will be TikTok, because notice how it would be pretty simple to just place your palm, and as soon as it detects, you can do this gesture to navigate up or down depending on what you want to do. It's pretty cool. In fact, you can also do a horizontal scroll to change songs if you are inside some players, or you can pause and resume music or even answer calls. And it has another feature called active visual perception, which is going to allow the device to detect when you are nearby, so it won't lock. A pretty interesting feature that I had not seen on other devices. Obviously integrates the My Remote application to be a universal remote control. And within the gallery, you could also press and hold on a person to subsequently make a crop or copy this image, or even can also extract text from some photos. And the photo editor comes with an interesting suite of artificial intelligence that must be installed separately. For example, we could expand our image through artificial intelligence, simply select towards a person to make a copy or crop this image, or even extract text from some photos, and the photo editor comes with an interesting suite of artificial intelligence that must be installed separately. For example, we could expand our image through artificial intelligence. Through artificial intelligence, simply select where we want to give more space and see how it will automatically fill all those gaps that will be around. To resize your photo can be a very useful tool. And the result, honestly, I found it good. Obviously not ultra spectacular, but it's pretty good. Gives you to choose several options for you to choose the one you like best. You could also delete people or objects from the image quite easily, but in this case it can be a simple deletion, or you can also activate the Pro mode that will use generative artificial intelligence and will be much more advanced and accurate when making these actions to delete people or objects. Then the result, I think, is quite attractive, although with generative artificial intelligence may take a little longer, but the result, I insist, that will be much more accurate. As you realize, it is not 100% accurate, but it's fine. Overall is an operating system. Remember that it is just starting. In many occasions, it will show you this kind of animations before loading the initial screen, something that could be a bit desperate, and it will also show you advertising in several applications, and that is something annoying in many moments, but at least it seems to be much more stable than what we saw in my UI, and has a new design also in the quick settings panel. Plus, thanks to the optical engine on the X-axis, we will have a very good feedback when we are using this device, feeling some bounces and interactions we do with the buttons. It has a fingerprint reader inside the screen that supports 5 records, allows you to change the animation of unlocking with this fingerprint, and also allows you to activate some shortcuts in this reader, but you cannot customize them. Also has facial unlock, but you know, it is not so recommended because it is only in 2 dimensions, so it is not very safe, and has a smart unlock only by Bluetooth, so it does not include Google Smart Lock that if they bring most Android devices within the file manager application. As you realize, first shows us an ad before we can open it, and finally we can access a secure folder in this way with a special gesture, and obviously can be protected by password or by your fingerprint within the security application. You can learn more tools, but first you have to see an ad, and here are available more security options such as locking applications, also the option to hide applications, clone applications, and more. Although it does not bring a child mode, but for scanning applications with malware you can use this option that is a scanning itself. I does not have any collaboration with cybersecurity companies dedicated to that, so it could become simple. The battery is 5000 milliamps, a very classic and very traditional capacity in the smartphone market, but in this case it did perform a little above what devices on average perform with batteries of this capacity, so testing the drainer in the foreground reached 4 hours with 52 minutes, very close to reach 5 hours, and in the background rose to 5 hours with 24 minutes, so it also seems to manage well the energy it gives to the applications running in the background. In fact, it could get more demanding with background applications if you enable a battery saver mode that will surely make the battery last much longer, and there is also available the ultra saver mode that obviously you will use it only in emergencies, but that could be very useful if you have little battery left, as it also allows you to add some applications that you consider indispensable. The charger is 90 watts. In this case, I have a European charger, but it comes adapted to your region. In my test using this charger in 15 minutes, it reached 39%. In 30 minutes, it got up to 67%, but the full charge then got a little slower and finished in 51 minutes, which is still a good time. In fact, it is likely that by activating the accelerate charge option, we could have an even faster charge, but it comes disabled by default, and there is still another option here from my Turbo, so it could also result in a bit of a tangled duplicity of functions. It seems Xiaomi needs to simplify this section, but yes, you could still have a faster charge, although the device could get hotter, and remember that heating does not do the health of the battery very well. And speaking of battery health, you should note that in this case it integrates optimized charging and also integrates limited charging, so it only goes up to 80%, so it does have the necessary care available in case you want to use it. This device does support 5G networks, although in this case it does not have support for eSIM, so if you are going on a trip you will have to purchase a card without physical. Also supports connectivity to Wi-Fi networks and 7 reaching very good download speeds, definitely thanks to the incorporation of Snapdragon 8s Gen 3. Also has NFC, so you can make mobile payments through Google Pay or even connect to accessories or routers that are compatible with NFC. But it is important that you know that it does not have FM radio. It has two options to project the screen, one that looks more advanced where you can hide notifications or project exclusively some photos or some videos, and another that is completely in mirror format but does not have a projection in desktop mode, nor is it able to project via cable. However, if you have Android Auto and with respect to sensors, if you have the aerometer sensor, geomagnetic field sensor, orientation sensor, also gyroscope, so those sensors can become useful in some games, and the proximity sensor unfortunately is virtual, so you can get to have some difficulties to activate it. Is usually activated when it is very close to your ear, but it is definitely something that we do not like very much. Xiaomi ecosystem is full of devices of different categories and styles, and in this version of the operating system integrates an option called interconnectivity, with which they intend to make the ecosystem even more advanced. But this is with the latest devices and is something that is doing gradually. So to date, I still do not consider the ecosystem is overly advanced in terms of the controls you have from one device to another, but if it could become quite useful, for example, you can share the clipboard, share notifications and other settings, but is not yet as advanced as that of Apple, Samsung or Huawei. Even so, in the quick settings panel quickly integrates some devices connected with Xiaomi Smart Hub, but as I say, there are still not so many compatible devices. However, from here you can also access directly to Mi Home, where you could get to control other devices. There is also access to Google Home, and obviously Xiaomi has good interaction technologies such as Xiaomi Share and Mi Beam, in addition to Google technologies like Quick Share or Google Fast Pay. However, Xiaomi currently does not have its own cloud running globally, so it depends on Google services in that regard. Now let's move on to talk about performance, which I think will be what most people are interested in about this device. So we are doing the application opening test, but I tell you that it has the Snapdragon 8S Gen 3 processor plus 8GB of RAM LPDDR4X. That is a pretty fast RAM, and also offers you still up to another 8 virtual gigabytes in RAM, and the storage is UFS 4.0. So it also has very good speed and is 256 gigabytes. In this case, it took 3.1 seconds to open each application, showing us that in reality, it seems that the processor is not so optimized, or the operating system is a little slower than we would like. In fact, the animation of opening applications seemed to me a little clumsy at times, confirming that the operating system still requires much more work if you really want to get to take advantage of all the power that has this processor. Fortunately, after opening the applications, it seems to me that the system has remained quite stable. Even we have not noticed any reboot or that the device gets slow when we are switching between all these applications. So I think the device will have a high performance in this type of high performance scenarios, which is one of the sections that most interest the public. So you can be sure that the device works well, although in this case we have just witnessed its first application reboot. And another important fact you should know is that it does not have the ability to expand its storage via microSD, so you are a little more limited in that sense, but fortunately 256 gigabytes is an excellent capacity. And since this device has video recording capabilities in 4K, we are going to test how long it takes to export a 1-minute video with several clips recorded in 4K with this device. And that's it. It took about 33 seconds. Honestly, I expected it to be much faster, considering it has the 5x LPDR RAM and 4.0 UF storage. So if you want maximum power, you're probably going to need to turn on ultimate mode, so I'm pretty sure it will be able to give you more performance. For gaming, this device incorporates a feature called Game Turbo, which is then called Game Space. Here you can see the games you have installed, and the curious thing in this case is that it also allows us to access some much more advanced settings with respect to the performance you want to achieve. Then you can have performance profiles here, and even notice that you can further customize how the touch controls work if you want a very fast response or a simpler response, obviously also depending on what you have installed. Response obviously also depending on how much power you are willing to consume. Also, when you run your game, notice that in this section appear the Game Turbo settings, where you can also select if you want a wild boost mode that will squeeze the maximum power of the processor even with an artificial intelligence optimization, or you want a balanced mode that is very important to know what performance can reach. You have a button to free up memory, also to free up storage, and watch out for this enhanced touch controls feature that will also allow you to have a more agile response when you play. You can also activate a do not disturb mode and take screenshots in image and video. In fact, it also has some different color rendering profiles inside the screen, and from here you can broadcast your screen to a wireless screen or control other aspects, including displaying notifications in a different style and modify your voice for games that have chat, or also activate some timers that can be useful. For games where you must be aware of some time to use some power, you could also open applications in this floating window mode and ready. In Call of Duty, this device by default gives very high quality graphics at a maximum frame rate. In fact, you can go up to an ultra rate and the quality drops to a medium level, which are settings that one usually sees available in high-end devices totally premium. So it is very surprising to see it available in a device of this price. In fact, all the effects can be activated simultaneously, so definitely the experience will be remarkably advanced. First, we played with the maximum rate, and as you are seeing in all the numbers, the performance was completely good in this one. The performance was completely good at this price. It will be very difficult that something can approach the power that has this device. Definitely is a super good processor, and usually in this price range we test much lower graphic qualities, but being such a powerful processor we will put it also very demanding tests. But you should be aware of that, because in the price range I think no device can give you a similar performance that is capable of achieving this. Definitely is its strongest and most attractive point, that surely. However, something that should be mentioned as a disadvantage is that the device came to heat up much more than we would have liked this, possibly because we activated the wild boost mode that is just debuting, so it is advisable to play without that mode activated. Then we also tested with the ultra rate, and in this case reached 60 frames per second. That is quite curious because other devices reach 90 frames per second in this configuration, so probably because of the heating issue the device was not able to reach a high frame rate of 60 frames per second in this configuration. Device was not able to reach a higher rate, and that definitely can be disappointing, especially for the most demanding gamers. But if you do not notice that, the truth is that you will continue playing very well. However, it is very relevant to say that other devices with this same processor, if they would be able to reach 90 frames per second, then we had a very good stability, but without going beyond 60 frames per second. And again, the heating note that exceeded 45 degrees Celsius, something that is quite strange in this game. In the Legends game, we changed the auto setting to a very high ultra graphic detail setting at 60 frames per second. And again, the experience was very good. We had very good stability, a few low peaks, but that is very normal in this game. And honestly, it didn't go below 44, so it is still something remarkably high. But again, even though the performance was overall very good, the temperature also went up very significantly, especially if you want to record the screen, as in this case, without recording the screen, it went up to 44.2 degrees Celsius, which in any case is already a pretty high temperature, and recording the screen was that it reached 46.2 degrees Celsius. So if you are going to want to have very long sessions of video games and even record gameplays, if you need to do it in a very cool place so that the device does not lose performance and especially not to affect the battery life much, remember that the very intense heating will make the battery degrade much faster. So unfortunately, this device would not be so recommended if you live in a place a little warm, or if you like to. We selected the resolution and the epic quality at 60 frames per second, and the performance is very high, and it really is a very good experience. But out of the performance here, if we noticed some small bug of Hyper OS, and this game has some conflict as it detects as if you had connected a gamepad but you do not have it connected, so it was necessary to connect a gamepad to play this content, and that had never happened to us on other devices. Obviously this could be corrected with an update, and it is a very specific issue, and it is very important to know that this is a very specific issue. And it is a very specific issue of this game, but if it also speaks of the level of software development that may have little, so that is something that can improve. But focusing again on the performance is a really very good experience on the processor, very good effects, but again the temperature was high. In fact, this game we ran it in a much cooler morning compared to previous tests and still came to have a fairly high heating, then confirms that this device could get to present more heat than we would like. And lastly, on Henshin Impact, we put it through a fairly complex test with very high quality graphics, turning everything up to high at 60 frames per second. And again, we had very good performance, just some small moments of low spikes, but really nothing serious. Although recording the screen did have a little more difficulty running the game completely smoothly, but it's still a good experience. Obviously, in this price range, as I've already told you, it will be impossible that another device can get to give you this same performance, so we could not get demanding for the price range. Really, the device gives you a very good gameplay. Just take into account, please note, the temperature is definitely the biggest enemy of the performance of this device in this test. Came to 45.8 degrees Celsius on a cool morning. So if it will be a detail that you'll have to deal with throughout your games, for the moment, this has been all with respect to the little F6 that, as a conclusion, I consider that it is a remarkably balanced device. Normally, little does not make devices with good cameras, but this is of the first little devices that I test whose photography is more attractive to me. Also has a very good screen, a very good battery, and very good charging power, and obviously the performance is the top you will find in this price range. So it is very interesting if you are willing to deal with some details in the software, especially with the ads within the system applications. I hope you like this video. If so, you know you can indicate it, and we'll see you next time.